Hello and welcome to Middle Eastern Thursday. So today I have for you only 3 fragrances, but that is because we have so much to discuss when it comes to these 3 fragrances. They have been making their rounds all over social media. There has been so much conversation about what they each remind us of. So today I just wanted to, number one, answer questions that I've received about these 3 fragrances. And I also want to tell you what I really think about if these fragrances were inspired by another or not, right? Because there is, again, so much conversation around it. But let's go ahead and jump right in because we have quite a bit to cover. I am going to be giving you a detailed review of each fragrance because this is the first time that I bring them to the channel. And then, of course, I'm going to do a comparison for you as it relates to the fragrances that, they were supposedly reminding others of, or the ones that they have been allegedly inspired by. But before we jump right in, if this is your first time here, I'm Arahi, and I'm your fragrance concierge because I'm totally committed to creating the best fragrance experience for you. I upload videos multiple times a week, and on this channel, we love to talk about all types of fragrances. So if that sounds like the type of content that you're interested in and like a good plan, then please consider subscribing, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget, leave a comment. Let's go. So before we jump into the video, I wanted to take a moment because I am sure most of you have noticed that now we are a 20K strong fam. And I can't tell you how thankful and excited I am that we have made it this far. I am very, very happy, very excited, very thankful, and I'm really looking forward to celebrating with all of you. Of course, I know you don't need me to give you anything or to do anything with you, but I do want to express my thankfulness and I do want to do a giveaway as always. But I am taking my time because I'm trying to find a way or an idea that allows me to make the giveaway open worldwide. That is really what I'm looking to do. I don't want to have to just limit it to the US. So please be patient with me because as soon as I figure that out, I will be circling back and letting you know what we're going to do as far as celebrating our 20K. That being said, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the love, for the support, for being with me. For those of you who have been with me from the beginning, those of you who have recently just joined, thank you so much for being a part of our fam. I can't tell you how much this means to me. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. And the first fragrance that I want to start with today, I have been so looking forward to having this discussion about this one because this is Lattafa Dynasty. And let me go ahead and show you the bottle in case you haven't had a chance to really take a look at it. Very, very nicely done. The name of the fragrance is Dynasty and the bottle speaks to a dynasty. But here's the thing about this fragrance. It has been compared to so many fragrances, but there are 2 fragrances that have really taken the lead as it relates to others feeling that this one has been inspired by. And those 2 fragrances are one from Clive Christian, which is L Red Tea Vetiver, and the other one is from Mask Milano and it's Russian tea. Now, I am here to tell you that today I'm going to be comparing it to those 2 fragrances after I give you the detailed review. But in addition to that, I'm going to be comparing it to a 3rd fragrance because I just want to leave this settled once and for all. Remember that everything that I share with you is just my opinion and that I am not saying that this one has copied another fragrance. I'm just saying that those fragrances remind us, right, of this one, and this one reminds us of those fragrances. That's all I'm saying. So they could have been allegedly inspired by those fragrances. But anyway, that's my disclaimer. So when it comes to Dynasty, this is a fragrance that has a very interesting note because it is a note that we do not frequently find in fragrances, and that is the note of rooibos tea. Now, rooibos tea is a note that I had only found in one other fragrance before encountering this one and the other 2 that I'm going to share with you today. and that is African Rooibos by Chris Collins. And that is a fragrance that I own. I own all of the fragrances that I'm going to discuss with you today, and I absolutely love it. But later on, I did discover Russian tea, and then I did discover, and I shared with you during a Saturday morning chatty scent corner, the latest from Clive Christian, which was that red tea vetiver. But all of those fragrances have one common denominator before we even get into comparisons, and that is that they all have that one note, which is rooibos tea. So Dynasty is a fragrance that was launched recently by Lattafa, and as soon as it was available, I was going to pick it up, but this was kindly sent to me in PR so that you know. And this is a fragrance that I was very interested in after hearing that there was the note again of rooibos tea, because it's not common. But then when I heard others speak about this fragrance and speak to the other fragrances that this one reminded them of, I was even more interested. So I started to work on it behind the scenes, and I have to tell you, I really believe that this is a standalone fragrance. This to me is not allegedly inspired by anything. I think this is a standalone fragrance. I don't even think that it's really a twist of the others that I'm going to share with you today. I think this is truly a standalone fragrance. So Dynasty is a fragrance that opens very much fresh, spicy. I'm going to tell you right now that this is a fragrance that I'm absolutely loving. This is incredible. This to me truly borders on masterpiece. Truly, truly, truly. I want to use it a little bit more before coming on here and telling you that it's a masterpiece, but this is unbelievably, exquisitely done. Now, it does open fresh, spicy, and at that, the leading note within those spicy notes is the ginger. That is the only note that I can specifically pick up on as it relates to that fresh, spicy opening. Now, in that opening, you're also going to find a certain degree of fruitiness. But the fruitiness does not allow me to really distinguish what is the fruit behind it, but there is definitely a fruitiness in the opening. It is also sweet, but not very sweet, just sweet. Now, as you start to approach midway in the olfactory journey, you're going to start to get little sniffs of that tea note. And if you're familiar with that rooibos note, you're going to know immediately that it is that tea. So it's going to start to seep in. And in addition to that tea, you're going to start to pick up on a good bit of woodiness. And the woodiness that you start to pick up approaching midway of the olfactory journey will continue to be with you all throughout the rest of the journey, at the dry down, and throughout the wear of the fragrance. Now that woodiness does intensify until it gets to the dry down where it remains consistent as it relates to the intensity of the woodiness. But this is definitely a fragrance that has a very dominant tea note, and it also has a good bit of woodiness. But it also has a spiciness, which again is going to be with you all throughout the wear of the fragrance. And to my nose, the one note that sticks out is definitely the ginger. Now, interestingly enough, the fruitiness that I picked up in the opening of the fragrance starts to fade midway on the olfactory journey. And by the dry down, I'm not getting any fruitiness. Same thing like with the leather. The leather I don't pick up until actually the dry down, because it just seems to me that until I reach the dry down with this fragrance, what I'm getting really is like those woody notes and those spicy notes perfectly blended together on a backdrop of a very elegantly done musk, which by the way is not animalic in any kind of way. But that is really what I'm getting with this fragrance. Now, speaking of the musk, I have to tell you that the musk that I pick up here is not only very, very smooth, but it is a musk that to me is very reminiscent of another fragrance that I do have in my collection from Mask Milano, which is Reflection. And curiously enough, the same perfumer behind Dynasty is the same perfumer, which is Alex Lee, behind Reflection. So at the dry down, you are going to get the most exquisite tea-centric fragrance that has a very present ginger, quite a bit of woodiness in the backdrop, and a very elegant and smoothly done musk. This fragrance is absolute perfection. I tell you, Lattafa has been on a roll and kicking it out of the ballpark because, you know, one moment I am loving one fragrance and then another one is launched and I am loving that one. And I have to tell you, and before you ask me, you know, do I love this one more than Dream of Haze now? No, I continue to have Dream of Haze at the top of my list, but this one, I just think that I need to use this one more in order to really decide if I'm loving this one more or not, because I love a good tea note fragrance, and here it has been done to perfection. And just think about the fact that this fragrance has not really had a chance to sit in my collection because I just used it a couple of times in order to compare and in order to be able to give you this review. But this is a fragrance that I have a feeling that once it has a chance to sit for several months in my collection, it's going to be incredibly addictive, and most likely it is going to become a top favorite. So to me, this is a fragrance that is suited for just about any season of the year. For any occasion, day or night, you could probably even make it your signature scent because it is a fragrance that I would wear to the office in just about any occasion. Is this a real easy pull kind of fragrance? I don't want you to think that this is an uncomplex kind of journey kind of fragrance. No. The mastery of this fragrance resides in the fact that there are so many different notes and accords, but the blend has been done exquisitely on that backdrop of a very present musk and that tea note with the spices and the woodiness. Now, at all that, for me, this is best suited for the ages of 25 plus. And I really think that you are going to love the performance of this fragrance because, again, it has not had a chance to sit in my collection and it is already giving me an 8+ hour day wear without me having to overspray or respray. It also has a very strong projection that exceeds the 2-hour mark, and it does have a moderate sillage. For me, this fragrance is all the way unisex. This does not lean to the feminine or to the masculine side. And I just really think that it is just such a versatile fragrance, guys, because you have no oud in this fragrance. I pick up on no oud whatsoever. And the musk here, even though it's a level 3, again, I can't stress enough how smooth and beautifully done that musk. I mean, it is just incredible. And again, it does remind me of that other fragrance from Masque Milano that I mentioned before, which is FRAGFLEX. So this must be the way in which Alex Lee develops his fragrances when they're musk based. So now let's speak to some comparisons, and let's go ahead and start with the Clive Christian fragrance, which is El Red Tea Vetiver. To begin with, let me just say that when it comes to comparing this fragrance to others that it may remind us of, the only common denominator in all of these fragrances is that note of rooibos. Other than that, there are differences with all of them. But let's start with El Red Tea Vetiver. So El Red Tea Vetiver, as the name says, it has a good bit of vetiver. And that vetiver, at least to my nose and on paper, does make the scent rather earthy. It gives the fragrance an earthy quality that you do not find in Dynasty whatsoever. Now, in Dynasty, you find a level of spiciness that is definitely much more intense than that you find in El Red Tea Vetiver, because I barely pick up on spiciness in that fragrance. But here, that spiciness, which is always like fresh spicy with that very dominant ginger, is present from first sniff all throughout the olfactory journey, at the dry down, and throughout the wear of the fragrance. Those are really very key differences, and they are not negligible. Now let's talk about Masque Milano Russian Tea. So Russian Tea is a fragrance that has a very dominant tea note, truly, but there's other things going on. So I'm going to speak to the not so negligible differences that I find between these two fragrances, okay? But I did want to start by sharing with you that although I do get Russian tea vibes with this fragrance, when I spray this fragrance, when I wear it on skin, when I test it on paper, it is giving me Russian tea vibes in parts of the olfactory journey, but not at the dry down. At the dry down, there is a considerable difference, which I will definitely outline for you next. So when it comes to Russian tea and Dynasty, I can tell you that Russian tea for me is a fragrance that is unisex and leans heavy to the masculine side because that leather note opens the fragrance. It is very present. It's a very nicely done leather note. It is smooth, but not very smooth, but it is definitely a dominant leather. For sure. You do not find that in Dynasty whatsoever. There is no dominant leather note. So that's just to begin with. The other thing that I find very much so in Russian tea is there is a green note, a very pronounced green note that is with me from first sniff all throughout the wear of the fragrance. It is present. And that green accord is one that I do not find in Dynasty whatsoever either. So now I want to speak to the biggest of all the differences that I find between Dynasty and Russian tea. And this is the critical difference that to me, to my nose, on my skin and on paper, sets them apart completely. And that is a smoky quality that you find in the scent of Russian tea. That smoky quality is coming from two notes. It's coming from the incense and it's coming from the birch. And it is a very intense, very present smoky accord that I do not find truly at all in Dynasty. Is there a tad of smokiness in this fragrance? At the dry down, there's a tad bit of smokiness. Yes, there is. I do pick up on it, but it could be produced by any other note. But when it comes to Russian tea, those notes are definitely the drivers behind that heavy smokiness that I pick up in the fragrance. So all in all, for me, when it comes to, comparing this fragrance to those two, which have been the most that, everybody has talked around and has said that maybe, this one was inspired by Russian tea, or that maybe this one was inspired by the Clive Christian L Red Tea Vetiver, I really do not get that. They are definitely set apart. I don't even find them to be 70% similar. So now I also want to, just to make sure we address all of the possibilities, right? I also want to do a quick comparison to African Rooibos from Chris Collins, because I really haven't heard anybody talk about that, but just in case someone sees the note of Rooibos and decides that, oh, could it compare to this one? So let me tell you, when it comes to the woodiness and the spiciness, you do find it, and you do find that tea note, of course. You find it in Dynasty and you find it in African Rooibos. But there is a powderiness and an herbal quality in African Rooibos that I do not find in this fragrance whatsoever. So that right there sets them apart completely. There is really no confusing or thinking that one was inspired by the other, or that there's a very strong similarity. So all in all, of all of the fragrances that I've discussed with you today that allegedly remind others of this fragrance, I can tell you that I can't even speak to any of them being similar to not even the tune of 60%. I just don't see it. Will a couple of them remind you in certain parts of their olfactory journey? Will they remind you of Dynasty? Will Dynasty remind you of a couple of them in certain parts of the olfactory journey? Maybe, yes, but at the dry down, it is very clear that these fragrances are different. Now, that being said, I am telling you, this is a fragrance that you really want to try, because this is truly exceptional. Truly an exceptional fragrance that is versatile, that will get you to any occasion for any season of the year. And I am so happy that it was sent to me, and I give it a 9.5 out of 10. All right. So now, oh boy, I hope you're ready, okay? So now we are going to talk about a fragrance that, like I told you before, I have all of these fragrances in my collection. And by the way, the next one that I'm going to speak about was also sent to me in PR. But I I really need to talk to you about this fragrance because this is a different story than what we just experienced with Dynasty. And I am speaking about French Avenue Vulcan Baie. Now, French Avenue Vulcan Baie, and let me show you this exquisitely done bottle. I know that many fam members are not into this snake motif, but you know what? Maybe you can remove it or something, because I tell you, this is absolutely beautiful. But let me just start right now by saying the following. As soon as I sprayed this fragrance, as soon as I sprayed it, you know how I tell you that I receive Middle Eastern fragrances and the first thing I do is uncap them, unpack them, and then spray them at least 8 times? Well, I did that with this one. But when I sprayed the first time, my eyes opened huge and I gasped, because I am telling you, this fragrance immediately reminded me of Stefan Humbert Luca's Pink Boa. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I had to show you that bottle, because this really reminds me tremendously of that fragrance. I can't even explain. So we did have Vulcan Faux, and Vulcan Faux, you know, did remind me of God of Fire, very much so. But this one, and here's the thing. So both of these fragrances, you know, when it comes to God of Fire and Pink Boa, they do not have a simple olfactory journey. They have quite a complex olfactory journey. But this one of the two is the most complex. Let me start by saying that this is not a crowd-pleasing fragrance. This was not made to be mass appealing. This is an exquisite fragrance, but this is not for everybody. So this is a fragrance that opens very much so fresh, spicy. That fresh spiciness clearly will bring to you the note of bergamot and the rosemary. Do I clearly pick up on the rosemary? No, it's quite faint, but there is a very big freshness to the opening of the fragrance and some spiciness that comes along with it. In addition to that, there is quite a bit of fruitiness, and the fragrance is sweet in the opening. But here's the thing, I can't distinguish what fruit, you know, is involved in the fruitiness of the opening. I really can't. But there is definitely like a fruity scent going on right along with that fresh spiciness. Now, as the journey continues, that fruitiness, instead of having like that backseat and being kind of faint, it starts to intensify, and for a moment it does take like a front seat. And it is very clear to me that there's a good bit of fruitiness coming from like a mix of berries, you know, strawberry, raspberry, blackberry. Like, it's truly like if you took a bowl of berries and, you know, you put all types of berries in it and then you sniffed it. That is truly what I get. Fresh, juicy, ripe berries of all types. I can't really distinguish one from the other much, but it is definitely the scent of a mix of juicy, ripe, sweet berries. So now, midway in the olfactory journey, you're going to find that the fragrance is sweet. At times, honestly, I pick it up as a bit too sweet. It won't be like that at the dry down, but midway in the olfactory journey, the fragrance is sweet because the fruitiness has definitely increased and the fragrance is quite ambery. But as you start to approach the dry down, the patchouli makes its debut. And once the patchouli comes in, all of those other accords like cut it short a little bit or diminish in their intensity, giving way for a patchouli that brings a certain degree of like earthiness to the fragrance. Is it one of those patchouli earthy qualities that make it a bit too much or a little bit like screechy? No. It's done very nicely, very balanced, but it is definitely present. So if you're not into patchouli and the earthiness that a nicely done patchouli can bring, then this fragrance is definitely not for you. But if you are into that character and oomph added by an earthy, nicely done, smooth, earthy patchouli, then this is one that you definitely want to try. Now, I do want you to know that at the dry down, I'm not getting the florals. I have not picked up on the florals throughout my journey. And I really tried to pick up on the florals in the fragrance, but I cannot pick up on the florals. And we'll talk more about that when I compare it to the one that it reminds me of. But I do not get the florals and I do not get the incense whatsoever. But the musk is like a level 2 to 3, more of a 3 musk, but it's not animalic in any kind of way. So to me, this is a fragrance that is perfect for the seasons of spring, summer, and fall. This is not a fragrance that I would ever pull during a very, very cold winter day. If it's one of those winter days that feel more like a fall day, then fine, then this is a fragrance that I think is appropriate. I think this is perfect for any age. I don't think that there's any limitation on the ages. This is a fragrance that to me is unisex, but leaning heavy to the feminine side, truly. Can I imagine a gent wearing this fragrance? Absolutely, because just wear whatever you want. But I think that this would be best if you layered it not with a woody fragrance, because it may be a bit much, but with any other masculine or heavy masculine leaning fragrance, if you layered it with this one, you may really enjoy the scent, because this is really nice if you're into those notes and those accords. This is a fragrance that has not had a chance to sit in my collection. This is very new, and I can tell you that right now it's giving me 7 to 8 hours, more towards the 7-hour mark. It is giving me a strong projection for a little bit over the 90-minute mark, but not making it to 2 hours. And it does have a moderate sillage. It is a fragrance that's going to get you compliments, even though it's not a mass appealing fragrance, but there is just something about it that will get others to pay attention and want to ask you what you're wearing. Now let's talk about how does this one, in my opinion, compare to the one that it reminds me of. And the one that it reminds me of, and the only one that it reminds me of, is that Stefan Humbert Lucas Pink Bois fragrance that I shared with you before. And I can tell you that we don't even need to spend any time talking about differences, whether they're negligible or not, because to my nose, on paper and on skin, when comparing both fragrances, I am not picking up on any considerable differences. Am I picking up on a couple of negligible ones? Yes, but they're not even relevant. They're not even worthy of taking the time. Truly, this has been done beautifully. It's almost like to the same tune of Vulcan Faux. If you've been with me for a while and you saw my review of Vulcan Faux and how we talked about it as it related to God of Fire, well, I am telling you that it is the same case, if not better, with this one. This is about, in my opinion, it reminds me about 90% of, Pink Bois for sure. I think that this is an exquisite launch from French Avenue. They have done this very, very nicely, and I definitely give it an 8.5 out of 10, and that's only because of the performance, which I think will be better once it has a chance to sit. So the next and last fragrance that I have for you today is from Maison Asrar, and this one is Legacy. Now, you guys know how much I love Maison Asrar fragrances, and I can tell you right now that this is not an exception. So whatever I share with you as it relates to, not just the review of the fragrance, but how it may compare to the one that it reminds me of, I really don't want you to think that I'm saying that this one is less for any reason. No, it's just an objective opinion based on my experience using it and testing it on paper. So this is a fragrance that was launched recently. This one was also sent to me. And this is a fragrance that I have heard everywhere, right? That it is supposed to be a fragrance that reminds others terribly, almost to an exact measure, reminds them terribly of a fragrance that I have in my collection and that I absolutely love. And that's from Ex Nihilo, and that's Blue Talisman. Now, let's talk about these two right after the review, because when it comes to this comparison, I have quite a bit to say. So Legacy is a fragrance that opens up fresh, spicy. And within that fresh spiciness, part of the freshness comes from some citrusy notes specific to the note of bergamot. Now, within that fresh spiciness, the dominant note is the ginger. And the ginger will be with you all the way from first sniff throughout the entire olfactory journey, at the dry down, and throughout the wear of the fragrance. The ginger note is very, very much plays a critical role within this scent profile. As the journey continues, the white florals make their debut, and while I can't specifically say which is the white floral that I pick up the most, it is definitely a bouquet of white florals. Now, midway in the olfactory journey, you're going to continue to have that fresh, spicy quality because it's always going to be present with that dominant ginger. You're going to have a very, very strong presence of those white florals. And you're also going to have a very, very good bit of woodiness in the background. As you approach the dry down is when I start to get the vanilla. And the vanilla comes in it peeks through all of the other notes and accords. And it's just enough to let you know that it's there. And then it immediately takes a back seat to those dominant notes, because up until that dry down, you are still going to have a very present white floral accord. And then you're also going to have the woodiness and that fresh spiciness that is inherent to the scent. So at the dry down, you are going to have a fresh, spicy, floral, ambery, slightly powdery, woody scent on a backdrop of a level 3 musk that is a bit animalic. It is not one of those musk scents that, because it's a little bit animalic, has a weird, scent to it. Oh no, this is a very nicely done musk, but it is definitely a bit animalic, which, to be honest with you, I'm actually loving because it does add character to the fragrance. So I think that this is suited for just about any season of the year, for any occasion, day or night, but I do think it is best suited for the ages of 25 plus. This is also a fragrance that, although it hasn't had a chance to sit much in my collection, is giving me pretty good performance because it is giving me a 7-hour day. Not more than that, no matter what I do, but it is giving me 7 hours. And it is giving me a strong projection for almost 90 minutes with a moderate sillage. This is also a fragrance that I think is definitely unisex. Does it lean a tad to the feminine side? I really don't think so. For me, this is truly unisex. So let's talk about a couple of things that I observe if I consider, the one that it's reminding me of, right? In the one that it is reminding me of, right, that Blue Talisman fragrance, I find that fragrance to be sweeter than this one. And I find the opening, while it is fresh, spicy, such as what we find in Legacy, and it does have that citrusy quality, the opening in the Ex Nihilo fragrance is fruity. It's truly not just citrusy. To my nose and on my skin, it is fruity, and it is clear that there's a note of mandarin or orange or both. But it is definitely a fruity, fresh, spicy opening. They both do have that very pronounced or dominant ginger note, and they are fresh, spicy openings. But in the original, I am definitely picking up on a fruitiness that I don't get in the Legacy. Another big difference is that while I pick up here on a bouquet of white florals, as I told you before, I can't really distinguish what are the specific florals involved. But when it comes to the one that it reminds me of, I clearly pick up on the orange blossom. And the orange blossom is quite dominant to my nose. The other considerable difference when we think about this fragrance compared to the one that it reminds me of is that in the original, right, or the one that it reminds me of, I pick up on a greenness, a green quality to the scent of the fragrance for sure. And the greenness, while not being overpowering or too intense or dominant, it is definitely present, and it is a quality that I do not find in Legacy whatsoever. And I think that that greenness is coming from the note of Georgie wood. Now, all of the differences that I've discussed with you so far are differences that, while not being negligible, they are quite considerable. They do set the two fragrances apart. But all in all, you are going to find that Legacy does have the same DNA, as the one that it reminds me of. So is Legacy to me almost the exact same fragrance? Does it remind me to the tune of a 95, 98%? Does it remind me of Blue Talisman in that way? No, it doesn't. I really believe that Legacy is more maybe at the most 70%, because those differences that I just talked through are not negligible. They're quite present, and you're going to pick up on them almost immediately. Now, I will say that at times in the olfactory journey of Legacy, you will be reminded very much so of Blue Talisman. And while that does happen, what I find is at the dry down, I am getting a similar scent, but there are considerable differences. And ultimately, I will say this, like, I find that the one that it reminds me of does have a bit more of a refined blend, but that may be a function of the fact that Legacy has not had a chance to sit in my collection for months and months at a time. So maybe after it has a chance to sit, we will find that more refined scent. All right, so we've reached the end of today's video, and I hope that this was helpful for you. I just wanted to come on here today and just speak in detail to just these 3 fragrances, because I have heard so much about all of these fragrances, and I've received so many questions around what are my thoughts as to, do they remind me of this one or that one? So I just wanted to put all of that to the rest and just let you know what my thoughts are, and more than my thoughts, really, like, what are my findings based on testing on skin and on paper. As always, thank you so much for hanging with me today, and I will see you all in the next video.